Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane, and I am the director of the Ashland Public Library. I'm really happy to be here with Dr. Philipp Schott, who is not only a veterinarian and an author, but he's really an interesting person. So I'm sure you're going to hear all about his journey to becoming an author and how his veterinary practice has played into his writing. In the meantime, or before we get started, I wanted to welcome the patrons of the Tewksbury Library, because we are partnering with Tewksbury for this program, as well as anybody else who heard about us from anywhere else. I would like to thank the Friends of the Ashland Public Library who support all of our programming. And you can buy signed books from Philip from Bank Square Books. I will put a link in the chat for that. They are book plates, but I still think they're gold. So make sure you support an indie bookstore with Philip's books. So Philipp Schott is a veterinarian and author. My understanding is the books are anecdotal and tell these amazing stories of the animals he works with and the people that bring in these animals to his clinics. And so there's like this humor and there's like angst and they're just beautiful. So I want to hear all about them. So Phil, welcome, and please tell us a little bit about yourself. And the book that we're talking about today is about the Siamese kitten, but we can talk about all of your books.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here virtually, of course. So yes, my name is Philipp Schott. I'm a veterinarian and writer living in Winnipeg, Canada, where it is still fully winter, I can tell you, just out the window there. So I was born in Germany, not afraid to say my age, 1965. I came over as a baby with my parents. My dad got a teaching position at the University of Saskatchewan as a physics professor. So I grew up there in a non-pet household. It's not that my parents were opposed to animals necessarily. It just wasn't part of their cultural milieu, if you will. It just wasn't something they considered. They had hard times during the war and so forth. Pets, I suppose, seemed like a luxury, something like that. But I was always really fascinated with animals, really fascinated. I memorized wild animals and domestic animals. I had memorized all the dog breeds. I had this little book. I remember it was Collins Gem book, and it was a little hardcover book. And I memorized all the breeds from A through Z. And desperately wanted to have a dog. I would have been happy with a cat as well. Ended up with a gerbil. I did have a gerbil at one point. But that was my full exposure to animals, to pets all growing up. So when it came time to choose a profession or choose what direction to go in university, I was a nerd. I was an academic. So for sure I was going to university, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was interested in biology, as I said, animals. I was interested in history. I was interested in geography, interested in literature. So my father, very practical man, took me aside and said, Philip, that's all very good. However, you should get a profession. If you want us to support you, get a profession. You can do this other stuff in your free time. I said, all right. Kind of a freakishly obedient 18-year-old. So in those days, for those of you that are old enough to remember, before the internet, you picked your courses through an actual catalog. So it was a course, they called it a course calendar. So it's this big fat book. And it was organized alphabetically. University of Saskatchewan has broad programs, lots and lots of different faculties. And I started flipping through. And the arrogance of youth, just one thing after another. Oh, this is lame, boring. Dentistry, are you serious? Oh, law, no. Medicine, people are gross. And I just kept flipping through and rejecting things as I was going along. And I got to the very, very end, or close to the end, and what I thought was the last thing was theology. I thought, oh, there better be something after this. Turned the page, and there was veterinary medicine. And I swear, seriously, this is how this went. I looked at that and I said, oh, okay, I don't really have an objection. That doesn't seem lame or boring, and it's a profession, so father will approve. And I like animals, sure, why not, So that's why my first book was entitled The Accidental Veterinarian, because I guess, accidental is maybe the wrong word, the unplanned veterinarian or something like that. But anyway, I stumbled into the profession, which makes me an exception. My profession is full of people who wanted to be veterinarians ever since they were 3 or 4 years old, ever since they were able to roughly pronounce the word, if not spell it correctly. My profession is full of people that are passionate about it. And not that I'm not passionate about it, but just my entry was different. And I'll talk about that a little later. why it does become important, that distinction in some ways. So I went to vet school, met my wife, future wife, still present wife, in vet school in Saskatoon. She was from Winnipeg. I thought, at the end of vet school, I would go on into academia, teach veterinary medicine, maybe do some research, maybe in epidemiology or some academic subdiscipline. But, after 7 years of university, I was broke and kind of getting a little bit burnt out on school. And Lorraine really wanted to go back home to Winnipeg, where she was from. So, yeah, I can work for a year or two, whatever, right? Pay off some student debt. So I got a job here in Winnipeg as a small animal practitioner. Winnipeg, for those of you that don't know, is a fair-sized city. We're about 800,000 people. So it's the clinics here are exclusively small animal clinics. I don't see horses or cows. The last time I saw a cow professionally was in vet school 33 years ago. So if you're looking for cow stories in my books, you won't find them, nor will you find horse stories, pig stories. There's one or two kind of where I cheat a little bit, but small animal veterinarian. And it took a little while, but not very long, like a couple of weeks, maybe a month. And I remember the day coming to the back door of the clinic, unlocking, thinking, I'm really looking forward to today. And I had never thought, I made a bet actually with my classmates at vet school that I would not be in general practice. There's just no way, it didn't interest me. But it turns out what I learned very quickly was that it wasn't an animal business that happened to involve people. It was a people business that happened to involve animals. So don't get me wrong, I love animals, obviously. Otherwise, that's like a prerequisite, right? Fundamental prerequisite. It's kind of like chefs liking food, right? But the animals, when they come to a vet clinic, they're not always at their best. They're often stressed and distress, in bad shape and so forth. So for those people going into it thinking there's going to be a lot of like happy times with animals, there's some, but a lot of it they're under duress. But the people was the interesting part. I found that this opened doors for me. This was really interesting. People were at their most human around animals. As a veterinarian, I was kind of seen as an honorary animal or something, I suppose. If people tell me things and were open and trusting in a way that I'd never experienced before. And they were just interesting, just fascinating. And all kinds of interesting stories people brought to me, and people really from all walks of life. There aren't pet people, right? People that don't have pets think that there's pet people as a particular category. No, it's all of humanity that happens to also have pets. So that kind of got its hooks into me. And then the problem solving, like the mystery aspect. Yes.
Can I ask a quick question though? What about all the people that go into veterinary medicine because they truly, like that they have that passion for animals? Yes. Have you noticed that it's a surprise to them that they actually have to deal with people too?
100%. So yes, that was I was alluding to earlier. So we can talk about the dark side of veterinary medicine for a moment. Our profession has the highest suicide rate among all professions. This often shocks people. It's very surprising. You think of veterinarians, you think of James Herriot, maybe you think of me, happy guy, right? But I came in with no preconceptions, and I could only be positively surprised. A lot of my colleagues come in with idealism, a very idealized view of what the profession is going to be about. And there are lots of introverts and people that go into it because they're uncomfortable around people and they think they're going to find refuge in the profession, that it's going to be primarily with animals, but it's not. And, people with their animals, when their animals are ill, can be very emotional. It's like humanity on steroids. It's the intense version of humanity that you get in veterinary medicine, which I found fascinating, kind of fun and cool. But lots of people find that overwhelming. And people that are very sensitive, maybe I'm not especially sensitive, I don't know. But people that are really thin-skinned and sensitive, the burnout is horrendous. Really, the burnout is horrendous. People internalize this and all the hurt and the grief and then the anger that's thrown at them sometimes when things don't go well. Slightly different situation in Canada because we have publicly funded Medicare. People here don't have any idea of what things cost. There aren't special cat and dog syringes. It's the same. It actually costs us more because the human hospitals can buy in larger bulk than we can. So our fundamental cost structure is high, other than wages, which are lower than on the human side. So you have to present these big bills to people, and a lot of us are super uncomfortable with that. And a lot of clients freak out then. I shouldn't say a lot, enough. So it's tough. And those people that come into it with that kind of introvert, I want to be around animals kind of perspective, it's a rude awakening. It's really hard for them. It's really hard.
Thank you.
I was lucky that way. So fast forward quarter century, I'm still, well, now 33 years, but I'm just going to jump a quarter century first. Quarter century later, I'm still here, still a veteran. I was still here, still veterinarian, 2015, turned 50. And I always wanted to write. And I'd always been writing a little bit in the background, a little bit just for myself and blogs and stuff like that. And I said, okay, it's time to take this seriously. I really want to do this. I want to express this side of me. What my dad said all those years ago, this other stuff that you want to do, you can do that in your free time. Okay, let's put this to the test. So a beautiful thing about veterinary medicine is often when you're in a large practice like I am, there's 7 of us in our practice, 7 veterinarians, 20 lay staff. I have a lot of freedom. I can just say, I don't want to work Thursdays anymore. And then it's like, all right, you're the boss. Don't have to work Thursdays anymore. And that's what I did. And Thursdays was my writing day. And so I started. And being German, I'm very disciplined. So on Thursdays, I would write, I'd say 3,000 words. Okay, I'm going to write 3,000 words. I just started doing it. And I realized, first I started writing, I run a whiskey tasting club. I started writing about that. Nobody wanted to read that. Traveled a lot. 2015, we actually went on a big adventure with the kids through Africa and Turkey and the South Pacific. And travel writing. Millions of people watching travel stories. And I realized people were interested in the veterinary stories. And I always tried to separate that, like firewall. This is my profession. This is my private life. And I realized actually the profession side, there's lots of stuff there that's really interesting for people. So that's where the Accidental Veterinarian came from. I wrote that, started it as a blog, then transitioned those blog posts into for more book format. Did all my research about how to become a published author. You do go through Canada, maybe a little easier, smaller country, less publishers. So I went through my list of publishers that had done something kind of maybe similar, and crafted my query letter. And I expected, okay, this is going to be years of this process. I'm going to paper a whole wall of rejection letters. 20 minutes later, I got from the email, I got a response. And it's blind luck. I mean, this is just absolutely blind luck. So you get the J.K. Rowlings of the world that were rejected, 20, 30 times or whatever her story was. Or I'm sure Stephen King has his rejection stories and so forth. Fantastic writers, right? We're very popular anyway. And myself, it's just blind luck. It's got nothing to do with talent, because it so happened that the editor I queried with ECW Press in Toronto, his wife is a veterinarian. Go figure. I mean, it's a small community, but it's not that small. We don't know each other, etc. And but it just had him. At least he was a little bit open to it. So to take it out of the slush pile, it's difficult if you don't have an agent. I don't have an agent. That just, once you get your first book published, I'm 6 books deep now.
So can I ask to go back a little bit? You were saying you were writing about your whiskey club and then travel and things like that. Did you always know you were going to write nonfiction?
So both. I was going to nonfiction was certainly where I wanted to start, because that's where I had expertise, if you will. But I do want to write fiction too, and I have. I've got a novel called The Willow Wren, based on my father's experiences as a child in Nazi Germany, and then as a refugee later on. And I've started a series of mystery novels with a veterinarian as the main character.
Awesome.
And there's 2 of those, one out, one coming in May, another one coming next year for the mystery novels.
I am going to say I would read your book about the whiskey club, but and I'm guessing people in the audience would as well.
Yeah. All right, there we go. Good. Well, there's a blog. I do have a whiskey blog, but yeah, it was just experimenting. But it's so strange that it didn't occur to me that veterinary medicine would be the thing. And it turns out it's it's a market niche. Like there's a demand for this stuff, and veterinary medicine, it's a story engine. It really is a story engine. Like not a day goes by where something interesting doesn't happen. Because as I said before, people are often at their most human around animals. I've seen bikers, like literal Hell's Angels type bikers that, breaking down in tears. I'm sure the guy hasn't cried. I'm making assumptions here. Hasn't cried in years, but when we had to put his old Rottweiler down. So, and little old ladies that, again, I'm making assumptions here, being a little unfair, but they don't, this one woman I can think of doesn't look like she'd cracked a smile since the previous century, that just really probably hard life, right? Really bitter and often very angry about things. And then she had, and that had been my experience with her a few times. And then she'd gotten a new kitten. And she was just suddenly, the sunshine came on, and she was a completely different person. That people let their guard down around pets.
What do you think that is, though? Like, why does somebody like who we stereotype as being very hardened, like a Hell's Angel type of, biker or whatever, could probably get cut with a machete and wouldn't cry, would do it over the loss of a pet?
Yeah, see, I think animals connect with us at a level kind of beyond language, right? Animals communicate through emotion. They're really, really good. Dogs and cats, and probably even hamsters and gerbils. We're just not that tuned into them. But dogs and cats especially are really good at picking up on our emotions. They communicate at an emotional level in a much better way than we do. And we still have that, though. That's still in us. It's not like we've lost that. We still have those parts of our brain. We've just kind of papered that over with all our language and civilization. And so they tap into that, and they allow us to access that more kind of deeper, more natural part, the way we probably were 100,000 years ago.
Well, it sounds like what you were saying, like why people go into veterinary medicine and why they find it so surprising is that we just get to enjoy the animals. We don't have to deal with the angst and the stories and the humans that go with it. We just get to enjoy them. So it seems very different. So we were going to talk about the Siamese kitten, and I was actually wondering about this because is Siamese kitten, like, my husband and I were talking about, where did that name come from? Siamese kitten, Siamese cat. And is it different now? Because, well, I could tell you.
A Thai cat, not a Siamese cat. Yeah, so I don't, I'm not actually an expert on cat breeds, but my understanding is that they actually have nothing to do with Siam, which is the old name for Thailand. It's just a name. That was early marketing. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's probably correct. Just like Himalayans don't come from the Himalayas just happen to be halfway between Persia and Siam. So if you cross a Persian and a Siamese, somebody looked at a map and said, yeah, what do you think? Bangladeshi, Himalayan? Himalayan sounds better than Bangladeshi. All right, let's go with that.
Okay.
I think these names are random. It's got nothing to do with them. Yeah, I've actually been to Thailand, and they don't have a lot of Siamese cats there. In fact, in Thailand, the cats often have tight corkscrew tails. The first couple of times I thought, oh, these cats are all getting the same injury. This is very weird, but it's obviously it's genetic.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us about this book. What is it? What made you rate it after your other books?
And so it's a third in a series that started with The Accidental Veterinarian. The second one was How to Examine a Wolverine. And this third one is The Battle Cry of the Siamese Kitten. And each of these books, the title is taken from one of the stories. It just, honestly, you just sit down with the editor and which story title is the most grabby. That's all about. It's kind of like the literary version of clickbait. So my apologies to the readers out there that were expecting a lot more Siamese kitten stories. There's just the one of the 60 stories. Yeah. So each of these books, and including Battle Cry of the Siamese Kitten, have about 60 stories that are drawn from my practice and my life. I mean, a little bit of there's a little bit of going back to sort of early experiences with animals and some experiences from vet school. And with my own pets actually feature I think each of them gets a chapter. in the battle cry, the Siamese Kitten. I tried really going back to the accidental veterinarian, all three of them, my idea, my purpose is just to draw the curtain back. So every profession has its public face, what the general public thinks is involved, and what actually happens. I'm sure it's the same with librarians. Probably people have their ideas of what a librarian does, and the reality is probably different.
We are open books.
Oh, there you go. That's a good one. So veterinarians, I think, people have an idea, and there's some media, there's James Herriot. And incidentally, for those of you that haven't watched the new series, it's very, very good. The new All Creatures Great and Small, but it does not reflect anything that has anything to do with what we do these days, at least. I mean, it's so different. It's so different now. So I want to pull the curtain back on the good, the bad, the ugly, as the cliche goes, all of it. The fun, the tragedy, the ordinary stuff, even like the financial aspect. How much does the veterinarian get paid? Why is my bill so high? All that that's all there. It's all in a series of stories. I just wanted to lay it out so people have some idea. Also, people may be thinking, maybe younger people, interested in the profession, give them some insight. But yeah, honestly, just to entertain too, because I think it is entertaining. It's just, funny stuff happens, crazy stuff, kooky stuff. I try to put warnings for the couple of really gross, like there are some gross things. So you gotta be cautious if you invite a veterinarian over for dinner. The table talk, my wife's a vet too, and the kids are just horrified. Neither of them are interested in the profession. But some of the table talk in a veterinary household is hair raising. So some of that's in there too.
Okay.
Stories about poop, what all the different colors of poop mean, if you were ever curious. Yeah.
I can't say I have been.
So yeah, that's what it's basically about. So Siamese Kitten, the third, is really not different than the other two. It just it's funny, after I wrote the first one, I thought, okay, that's it. 60 stories, I'm good. And then the publisher said, you sure you don't have any more? The first one did quite well. It was translated into a number of languages and so forth. So I thought, no, I don't really have any more. Oh, and then I thought, okay, but that was that funny thing, and that was that other time. And then so I wrote the second book, How to Examine a Wolverine. And thought, okay, that is really it. I'm done, tapped out. I'm getting towards the end of my career. Really, not much more is going to happen. It's going to be that interesting. And sure enough, I had enough for a third collection. This may be it. I'm not sure, but we'll see.
Sounds like you say that every time.
I've said that every time, but yeah, people like the exotic animal stories, especially. And I'm not an exotic animal veterinarian. That's a whole sub-discipline, right? It's a specialty unto itself.
Lois and Eva Jane both want to know more about your own pets. Are you a dog person, cat person, both?
Both. So that's the excellent opportunity for me to dispel a myth. And the myth is that there are cat people and dog people. In my mind, it's just people that haven't had dogs yet and people that haven't had cats yet. I've had that happen so many times that somebody, like 33 years in practice now, and I can tell you so many times that I'm going to be a little bit gender biased here. So typically it's men that say that they are not cat people, that they're only dog people. And then something happens in life, where a cat shows up. Oh, except this cat. This cat is different. This cat, I'm not really, but this cat it's kind of like a dog. I really like this cat, but otherwise, So, and the reverse has certainly happened too. For some reason among our friends, a lot of our friends don't have cats, but we have 3 cats and a dog. And they'll say, yeah, we don't like, but yeah, your cats are pretty cool. If we could be guaranteed of getting cats like your cats, and then that would be all right. Yeah, just those biases. So I started out neither, right? I was a gerbil person because that was the only pet I was allowed to have. We did, while I was in school, while I was starting to study veterinary medicine, we did have a stray cat show up. And so my parents did later in life finally become pet people. We've got a moment. There's a funny little story there. My dad, proper German physics professor. That's what he was. Is pretty much fits the stereotype that you would imagine with a German physics professor. And we're not okay. This cat, he can be in the garage. That's okay. We'll put food and water out there. So all right, fine. And then it got really cold, and the garage is unheated. This is Saskatchewan. I was living in Saskatchewan then. It gets very cold in the winter, -30 type of cold. So okay, you can come in the basement, but no, nowhere else in the house. I said, all right, fine. Cat comes in the basement. You know where the story's going, right? So then cat is meowing pitifully in the basement, right? Just cat is a social cat. Mook was his name. Mook was a social cat. Wanted to be with the people. So okay. He can come onto the main floor, but not into the bedrooms. So one day I came home from school. Nobody else was home, just my dad was home. And I hear this weird noise upstairs in my dad's room. And kind of a scrabbling noise and some funny sounds. And I go up and knock on the door and open the door. And my dad on all fours playing with the cat in his bedroom. So this is somebody becoming a cat person. But I always wanted a dog too. My wife had cats, so we had cats when I moved to Winnipeg, and then my daughter begged for a dog, so we eventually got a dog who is the love of my life, Orbit, my 10-year-old Sheltie.
Oh.
Everyone who has a dog has this story. The spouse doesn't greet them at the door when they come home. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's most cases. The kids don't come running anymore past the age of 12 or 13, probably even past the age of 8 or 9. I'm trying to remember now. But the dog reliably comes to the door and is delighted to see me. Absolutely delighted. So I'm both a cat and a dog person.
I love the way that you're talking about pets too, as almost like they're human, but not, there's something about it that makes you think like they have like human emotions, or they create emotions within you.
Yeah. I mean, they're human adjacent, it's like, I find it interesting that we're spending so much effort. I guess not that much effort, but some effort to try and find intelligent life in outer space and try to connect with aliens and so forth. There's aliens among us. I mean, okay, dogs and cats haven't created a civilization, but they're smarter than we give them credit for. They're not going to do advanced calculus or do your taxes for you, but brain size doesn't actually correlate all that strongly to intelligence. Do we look at people with large heads and say, must be really smart?
I think we actually think the opposite there.
So I find them really interesting.
So Michelle calls her cat her furry daughter, and she also has a question, which I think is really interesting. Do you have any other family members that are that have writing interests, especially about animals?
My daughter is interested in writing. But I think she's writing just casually. She's like a university student, so she's writing fantasy stuff, I think, primarily.
Oh, okay. Some of the stories that you write about with your cats and dogs and pets are also fantastical. So I'm gonna say that. So Joyce says, do you think TV series like Great Creatures, Great and Small has increased interest in veterinarians and their practices? There are a lot of reality shows about vets as well.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. I think it definitely has. I mean, James Herriot himself, Alf White was his actual name, is such a central figure. Like there's other the dentists really need a Herriot figure, right? There's no, I mean, he's really such a good standard bearer for the profession and such a good role model. And he was by all accounts, a decent human being, and he's a great writer and seemed to have been for the time a good veterinarian. So that's very inspiring for people. And for me, it was the opposite. So again, I'd really kind of stumbled into the profession, had no real preparation, never been inside a vet clinic, had never met a veterinarian before I went to vet school. I did a little volunteering immediately the summer before, but before I applied, I hadn't. So everybody said, oh, you must have read James Herriot. And I said, no. Should I? I said, yeah, you should. Yeah, it'll get you pumped up. It terrified me when I read it, because he worked so hard. Those hours and the emotional draining and so on. But in the city, I don't have to work those kind of hours. But still, it for me, it was an eye opener. Like, oh wow, okay, this is good thing I'm planning on going into research and into practice, because I don't think I'm nearly hardworking enough for practice as far as period goes. But and then the true vet stories, I haven't watched too many of them. It's like the English have this expression, a busman's holiday, right? I don't spend a lot of free time reading vet stuff and watching vet things. Other than, as I said, the new All Creatures Great and Small. I think PBS carries it in the US. Is wonderful. It's actually very well done. But beyond that, no, I kind of avoid it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like a chef going home and having, a frozen dinner kind of thing. Not get away from it a little bit.
Exactly.
Although
No, it's
Barb does ask if you've read Cy Montgomery, who's a popular animal writer from New Hampshire.
No, I haven't. I don't. So what's an example of a book? Do you know? I recognize the book if I don't recognize the name of the
Barb,
author.
can you put that in the chat? Some of Cy Montgomery's books. I could look it up, but then I would be distracted.
Okay, yeah. No, I don't recognize the name, but
Okay.
yeah,
So somebody asked, what is the most unusual animal you've ever treated? Because you said you just do like mostly cats and dogs.
Yeah. So, and those are always the most popular stories in my collections. There's usually about a half a dozen exotic animal stories because I do see some. So I have to put this in air quotes, specialty, because that's a legally protected thing. I'm not actually a specialist, but the old parable in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, applies in Winnipeg. We don't have a lot of specialists here. So I do ultrasound, and we don't have a radiologist or a board certified specialist. So I do a lot of ultrasound for the community. And so the zoo brings their animals, and various people with exotic pets bring their animals for ultrasound specifically. So depending on what you want to call exotic, I can tell you about the 6 meter long, so that's like 18 feet long, Burmese python, or I can tell you about the baby snow leopard. Which would you prefer?
I'm a fan of the snow leopard just because I don't like snakes, but I'll go whatever anybody wants to hear about.
All right. Well, we'll start with snow leopard. So the cool thing about a baby snow leopard, besides being like just the most beautiful animal you can imagine, like I was quite a wildlife enthusiast when I was a kid. Like I said, biology was one of the subjects, non-professional subjects that I was interested in. And snow leopards were among my favorite animals. So to have this opportunity, 40 years later to go, and this was just a couple of years ago, to go and ultrasound this baby snow leopard. But the cool thing about it is it's small. It's like the size of, it's okay, a little past what the camera can like this picture, like a small Cocker Spaniel. So the big cat, quite a large cat, and it's really fluffy and it's super cute. But it doesn't know it's fluffy and cute. It thinks it is a fierce snow leopard. So it's all there's nothing cuter than something cute trying to be fierce. And they just held it. The zookeepers, they said, yeah, up to about 6 months, they didn't need to use any drugs or anything like that. I was just ultrasounding its heart. They just had a concern because there was some familial trait they wanted me to check. But no, beautifully, perfectly functional heart, and great, lovely animal, and so soft. Wolverine is super soft too, incidentally. Like a Wolverine, you could just dig your fingers into the fur. Those need to be fully unconscious though, like 100% out cold. You're not going near a Wolverine. But
I agree with that. Regardless, I mean, I've seen the X-Men. So somebody asks here if you could mention the cat and rat story.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is kind of interesting. So this is a little bit of deep science here. So toxoplasmosis, this is a parasite that can be passed in cat feces. And this parasite, this is the reason why pregnant women are not supposed to clean litter boxes, because it can accidentally migrate to a human fetus and cause damage. So in fact, just a little side note here, the bigger risk is gardening, because typically house cats won't have toxoplasmosis. They need to be hunters, like eating rats and mice and so forth, to get toxo, and typically house cats don't do that. So it's the feral cats, the neighborhood cats, the strays that are likely to harbor toxo, and then when they poop in your flower garden, if you're pregnant, please wear gloves if you're gardening, because that's your higher risk. Anyway, little side note. So turns out that rats who are infected with toxoplasmosis lose their fear of cats. So the parasite is smart in a way. This is just through evolution. It's not actually thinking these thoughts, one presumes anyway. They make themselves more viable as prey because they lose their fear of cats, and it's thought that they might be even sexually attracted to cats. That's what toxo turns on in their brains.
Hmm.
We call it toxo for short. And then the cats predate on them, eat them. The toxoplasmosis gets into the cat and gets pooped out, and thus completes its life cycle. This is where we cue Elton John, right? The circle of life. So there's been some research, and though this isn't confirmed, but there's some research to show that humans with cats are more likely to have toxoplasmosis antibodies. But remember, then I said that you're not getting it from your house cat. So you've gotten toxoplasmosis from somewhere else, and you're more likely to want to have a cat. Now think about that. Now, why would that be? So there's different theories, and one of them is way back in evolution, if we lost our fear of predatory cats like saber-toothed tigers, that would make sense for the life cycle of toxoplasmosis. So just kind of a freaky, creepy thing to think about.
Okay. Interesting. I would like to hear about that Burmese snake.
Yeah, so this snake was 6 meters long, so 18 feet long. It was enormous. We couldn't weigh it. It wouldn't fit on the scale. We're guessing maybe 250 pounds, something like that. Showed up, it was referred by it wasn't a zoo one, it was owned by a private individual. It was referred by a colleague who sees snakes because the snake could stop eating. Like they do stop eating for periods, but for a much longer period. So he's worried there was some obstruction or something. So ultrasound is going to be the best way to sort that out. So the guy shows up. He's got his he's about my age, but I'm going to say much more disheveled. He's got his rock and roll T-shirt. I think it was Judas Priest or something like that. He's driving a K car. This is recently, so he still had a K car on the road. It was all a rust bucket, right? And pulls up beside the clinic, and he comes to the door and says, "Okay, you need." Send some people out because I can't carry the snake in by myself. So snake was all wrapped up in the snake's name was Abu. I don't remember what I called it. I changed all the names in the book. I don't remember what I called him in the book, but his name was Abu. Wrapped him in a big Afghan and we're looking for snake bats on this Afghan. So it took 3 people like this with their arms and 4 people with their arms like held like kind of shelf brackets to carry the snake in, haul it in. We couldn't actually fit it in the room, so it had to kind of curl around. I had to get down on the ground with the ultrasound. And so a snake is a long tubular object, stating the obvious. I can almost all species I can find the heart by landmarks like ribs and so forth. The snake, no, it's just a tube of muscle. Veterinarians use Google. I Googled it. The heart is about 1/3 of the way along in a Burmese python, so I kind of looked along, but this thing is so powerful. It's like a hydraulic jack trying to push back against. So if Abu wants to move, Abu's going to move. So it's not really dangerous because they are fairly slow moving. Like if you're going to get killed by constrictor, so to be clear, a python constricts its prey and kills it. It's not a bitey type of snake. It's more a squeezy type of snake. So there'd have to be something wrong with you if you got killed by a python. So I wasn't too concerned, but it was time consuming because to move around as the snake is moving and pushing and coiling and so forth. And unfortunately, we found that he had a tumor in there. So I don't know. He lived a little while longer, but it wasn't a good diagnosis for the poor snake. The guy was really upset. He really loved his snake.
Okay. We all have our things, right?
For sure. Yeah.
So back to Cy Montgomery. Barb says becoming a good creature is one of their family favorites. He also wrote Tamed and Untamed and the Soul of an Octopus.
Oh, okay. Soul of an Octopus. I've read that. Yeah, I've read. Okay, so I've read Cy as in SY, right?
SY. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I've read that. I've read Soul of an Octopus. Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's see. And somebody asks here, I'm having trouble following both the chat and the Q&A. That's why I was asking for people to put the questions in the Q&A. But Pat says, would you have any techniques to help bathe an anxious dog?
Don't do it. So actually there's a chapter in Battle Cry, the Siamese Kitten about that specific question. I think there's a tendency to overbathe dog. I'll get to how to bathe when you need to in a moment, but I'm just going to preamble and say, that there's a tendency to overbathe dogs. A lot of dogs don't need to be bathed at all. So this is kind of embedded in our culture somehow that that's part of what you do with a dog. You have to bathe it. Not true for most breeds. There are some exceptions. And so obviously if they're stinky or nasty or messy, go ahead and bathe them. If there's a particular medical condition where they need a medicated shampoo, go ahead and bathe them. Otherwise, not really necessary. Risk is stripping the natural oils out of the skin. So if they're really anxious, there's two kind of approaches. If you've got a lot of patience, then with anything that causes anxiety, you want to use a kind of an approximation sort of technique where you just get closer and closer to the scary thing. So you find out what the trigger is. Is it going into the bathroom? Is it running the tap? Is it, take it as far as you can to the point that you start to see him get a little bit anxious, and then you give him a reward. And then you repeat that again and again until he becomes comfortable with the thing that makes them a little bit anxious, and hopefully he's no longer a little bit anxious because he associates that with a positive, with a reward. And then you move the goalposts a little bit. So whatever it might be, a little bit further into the bathroom, or just a little tap on a little bit louder, or whatever that point might be. Or if it's none of that, it's just getting him in the tub, taking some water from the tub, putting him on it on him, putting his paw in the tub. This is very laborious, very time consuming. It'll take you months and months to get to the point that he's comfortable going in the tub, but that's technically how you're supposed to do that. Shortcut is you can talk to your veterinarian about anti-anxiety meds. So that's a possibility as well. And then we have more choices now than we used to have, and ones that are a little bit more tailored. They aren't quite the blunt instruments, and they used to really be literally just Valium. And now we have a lot of other options. So that's an avenue too, if you really need to bathe them like soon. Because you don't, if they're really anxious and you force it, you're going to get to do that one time. You're never going to get to do that again. You're going to, or it's going to be just that much harder the next time. Just don't fight with your pets, please.
Yeah. Somebody says, "Hi, Philip. I'm an aspiring vet and a huge fan. I was wondering how you and your colleagues prevent burnout."
How do we prevent burnout? Yeah. So, a few different things. I think it's different for different people, of course. For me, it was never really a huge threat, just because as I outlined earlier, my story is a little bit different, and I have a lot of freedom in a larger practice. I'm just working 3 days a week. That helps enormously. Like the people that are doing 60 hours, and my hat's off to them, but my heart's out to them too. I think they're headed for burnout. So being realistic, what you can take on, number one. Number two, having an active outside veterinary medicine life. I talked about that firewall before. That was actually a defense mechanism too. It's the people that live and breathe veterinary medicine 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Maybe some people can do that successfully, but I think that's also a formula for burnout. You need a well-rounded life, and it makes you a more interesting person actually too, if you can have other stuff going on at other times. And the third thing is just a sense of humor. It's a philosophical adjustment to not take the heavy. Some things are legitimately heavy and need to be addressed in a heavy way, but as much as possible, laugh about whatever you can laugh about. Keep it light and fun, and just understanding that you're doing good in the world and people really appreciate it, and that you may not always hear that, right? Very few people express their gratitude. But for everyone that expressed, you always hear this thing, but every person that complains, there's 10 that didn't complain. It's the same for gratitude, actually, too. So for every person that thanks you, there's 10 that didn't thank you because they were busy or too introverted or whatever, right? So that goes too. So just be aware that you are valued and loved.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's nice. I think we can say that for everything, but you had said that vets have the highest suicide rate.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you, beyond burnout, how do you manage the emotional aspect of the work that you do? Not you per se, but like people.
Yeah. And again, I think different people have different techniques. I find, it's just me, I find philosophy very helpful. So other people might find religion to be helpful, or other ways of framing bigger pictures. For me, it happens to be philosophy. But taking advantage of the support sets that are out there, and not being afraid to speak up when you're starting to feel stressed. I think those barriers, I think the coming generation of veterinarians are going to be better shape, and we'll see that statistic change, because although the pressures are getting higher, honestly, clients are becoming more demanding. But younger veterinarians are more likely to be more open about their emotional state and understand that everyone's in the same boat and nobody's going to judge you. Just take advantage of the supports that are there. Your colleagues, your professional association, in most cases, will have counseling services and so forth, and that's all there. And a previous generation saw that as, I don't know, weakness or something, I guess. I'm not sure what the barriers were, unprofessional perhaps, but I think we're now much more open to talking about these things. And it's a general overall mental health conversation, right? Mental health, it's a much better time to have mental health problems than it was 20, 30 years ago. And people are much more open about it.
So Pat asks, what are your thoughts? I have the same question about dogs that people that kiss their dogs and vice versa.
Yeah. So, it's amazing. And maybe you can't really see, but maybe you can guess I'm fairly thin. And so maybe I have intestinal parasites because of the number of times I've been kissed by dogs. I've been like routinely, I'm French kissed by dogs in the practice. I don't intend to, right? I'm going to examine the dog and I'm in close and then the tongue goes out. So it doesn't seem to be that harmful. I'm not a human physician. Okay. So I'm not going to speak to people's health, but hasn't caused a problem for me. And there's some theorizing on, and now I will speak on the human medical side, about the rise in allergies in humans, and that one component may be that people are living too clean a life, and that it has been demonstrated that farm children are much less likely to have allergies, and close contact with animals might be somewhat protective, train a more robust immune system at a young age. So. But as far as socially what it means to kiss animals and so on, I don't know, that gets us down also on the path of people that dress their animals in fancy sweaters and so forth. We live in a diverse society with diverse cultural norms, so I'm not going to judge.
No judgment here either. So Barb says that Cy Montgomery has quite a number of animal books. I didn't realize Cy Montgomery is a woman.
Okay.
Her bio on Temple Grandin on cows and autism is perhaps the biggest international bestseller.
Okay. That's cool. I should read that. So
I think
good.
I would too.
I'm writing right now. My project is I'm writing a popular history of veterinary medicine, and I was going to include something about Temple Grandin. So some more information is good. I haven't gotten
research
that far,
for you
at around 1820 right now.
Helen asks, what is your best advice for getting a nonfiction children's book published? I have written a nonfiction children's book about animals, but haven't taken the next step.
So it's research and luck. I don't know how to advise people to have luck. Luck just happens.
Yeah.
But the research, you really have to research your publishers and just research the market. And when you write your query letter, make it clear that you researched the market and said, okay, this book is similar to these ones that did well, but maybe it's a new approach or a different niche and so forth. Ultimately, this is going to sound crass and terrible, but publishing is a business, right? It's a business proposition, and you have to make a business case that this is going to be worth their while, and they're not going to lose their shirts on you. So that's part of it. And there's advice online how to write these query letters and so forth. But that's research the publishers, make sure that the publisher is the right fit and that their catalog and maybe even read some of the stuff that they published, and then writing that really good query letter that makes a business case for them. That's my best advice.
So one of the things you've said is that you became an accidental veterinarian, but Sue wants to know if you had any impactful mentors like James Herriot had.
Yeah, I did. The first veterinarians I worked for, they really opened my eyes to, so that'd be, Al Clark and Barb Devian, very, very different people. Al opened the practice in 1959. He was very, very old school. People were afraid of him. He was a nice guy though, but underneath, he had a crusty exterior, kind of a cliche, I guess. And then Barb, very much, a new woman, right? A child of the 70s. And I mean, having gone to school in the 70s, not born in the 70s, and very progressive feminist, and just these different approaches, and but just the way they dealt with people. And that was, again, the thing, the human aspect of it that was opened my eyes, that they were quite impactful. And then, I had lots of really good mentors in vet school that the mentorship was was not helpful, because I had a plan to go into research, and if I had, I could have named a few names of people that really inspired me there, but I ended up down this other path.
Okay. Michelle wants to know if there's any way to assist in picking the best pet for your family. What is your best advice for picking the best fit for a pet?
Yeah, so if you can, I mean, you have to look at what you want, like in terms of what are you expecting to get out of a pet, if you're wanting to start to narrow the list. So obviously, if you want to go on walks, that's going to be a dog, not a cat. So just stating that they're very obvious. But even among dogs, if you're talking about dogs, dog breeds all have different kinds of temperaments and different kinds of needs in terms of their activities. So it depends how active your family is. So you can go down that path of, this is what we need, and this breed sort of matches on the internet. But honestly, my best advice is to go to a shelter and look at the mutts and the stray cats that are brought in, and just look for a connection, like the one that you made eye contact, and it seems to be, there seems to be something there, and that's as good as it gets, right? Because it's a crapshoot, honestly. You just don't know. You can do all the research in the world, and you just don't know, because they're all individuals, just like human children when they're born are all individuals. Pets they're all individuals. A little bit of additional advice there. Don't, this is going to sound harsh, don't be swayed to take the runts and the ones that have problems. Don't let you, if you're not an experienced pet owner, leave that to the experienced ones. For for a first pet, you want a solid, healthy pet. And you don't also want the most exuberant one. Don't pick the type A that comes running, the alpha dog that comes running right up and is really excited. Might be a little bit harder to train. You want the kind of the middle of the pack. You don't want the one that you feel bad about because it's the little skinny one hiding in the corner. You don't want the one that's in your face. You want the one kind of in the middle there that you're making eye contact with, and that seems sweet, and just go with your gut.
Oh, that sounds like great advice. So I'm just going to ask some really quick, like, what was for you personally, what's been the saddest story to write?
Oh my gosh, there are many sad stories, I guess. I'm going to think from this last book, because that's most recent in my mind, because it was a Sheltie, and so my dog's a Sheltie, and it was it was a complicated diagnosis. It took us a while to figure out what was going on with the dog. And then when we ultimately did, she had an inoperable cancer. Just that, seeing my own, and this is just, I guess, selfish, seeing my own dog in this dog, and I knew these people well. I knew how much this hurt them and how much it broke their hearts. I remember, them handing me the toy that was to go with the dog to be cremated, and I just lost it, really.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, that's so sad. What about your most joyful story?
Joyful story. Well, I have a weird sense of humor, so I don't know. The more joyful, it probably actually would be that snow leopard. I'm going to go for the easy win there. The snow leopard cub. That was just just pure beauty, and just in contact with this wildness, right? That's such a privilege. Just spent the whole day grinning afterwards, and we weren't allowed to share photos on social media. My wife came along too, and so.
What about your most strange story? What was the thing that really was like, wow?
Oh, well,
Let's see that.
I don't know whether we have enough time for it. It's so in the end of the first book, I've got the story. I was trying to sum it up pretty quick. This woman, very strong attachment, a single woman, very strongly attached with her dog. There's just the two of them together, a little dog, and eventually the dog dies. So it was lived a good life and so forth. She was a regular client. She was in all the time. I don't want to say she was a hypochondriac, but she was very, very concerned about her dog. So every little thing. So I saw her a lot. So it's had to be quite a while after the dog died. I see her in the waiting room, and she's got a bag, like a opaque shopping bag, and a laptop. I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm thinking, bag, just bring me a present. People bring me presents. So we get bottles of wine and stuff. It's like, yeah, you know her pretty well. So, but she'd booked a half an hour with us. All right. So we go into an exam room, and she opens up her laptop, and she's got this PowerPoint with the glory that was this dog's life. And it's with sad music and all this. It's lovely. It's a little odd, I guess, but it was fine. You know, I get it. And I was appreciative. And then I keep shooting glances at this bag, like, what's going on with this bag? And so she pulled a teddy bear out, and this was the dog's favorite teddy. And she shows it to me and says, "Can you by smell tell the species of urine?" I'm like, I don't, dog and cat pee. Tomcat has a particular smell. Rodents, yeah, I'm just super naive and telling this, probably a lot of you out there are cringing because you know where this is headed. And they, I can try and see if it's a mouse or something. You're worried that mice are peeing on his teddy, and she said, yeah. So I blotter it, and there's a yellow substance. It kind of smells like pee, and but I said, no, I don't think this is rodent. It's mammal. It's not a tomcat. And I said, oh, good, okay, because I'm pretty sure it's his ghost has come back and is peeing on his teddy, because he used to do that when he was alive. I'm like, huh, okay, what are you going to say to that? All right, fine. So I'm home later, and if there's anybody under the age of, let's say, 14, you probably maybe walk away from the camera now or close your ears. So I'm telling the story to my wife, and she looks at me and says, Philip, you know whose urine that is? So that is easily the strangest thing. And I told other people, that's well, it's with their BP.
That would take the top ticket. Wow. Well, she must have loved her pet so much.
Yeah. And so, I don't tell that story very often because I don't want people to, ooh, crazy, but just a woman that's hurting and having trouble dealing with her grief, right? And there's some mental health stuff going on there, but it's a way, it's whatever's happening is happening, I think, unconsciously, subconsciously, and it's a way of keeping him alive for her. And it's sad, really. It's sad about the loneliness, and it's a sad story, not a funny story, but it's the strangest one. Pretty easily, yeah.
No, but you sort of really highlight the connections that we make with our pets that are so strong that we really can't, even when they're gone, it's hard to let go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's not it's getting better, but the understanding in our society of the grief people feel and the loss of their animals is still has a ways to come. For a lot of people, they just have to really suppress that because they're expected to go into work the next day, and they're expected to get maybe a pat on the back or a little hug, and then life is expected to go on, whereas that would never be the case with a human, right? With the grief can be as real, as painful, maybe more so for some people, and we still have a ways to go to recognize that.
Yeah, well, we're working on it. Pat says, thank you so much for your presentation. It was so informative and engaging. Cheryl says that she picked up Battle Cry, the Siamese Kitten, at the library today. She can't wait to read it. I have an expectant Siamese mother, so I had to order it.
Okay, yeah, well, there's not any advice about that, but anyway.
Well, thank you so much. I did want to ask you, you mentioned very quick a little while ago what you're writing next. What's up next for you? What can we look forward to?
So yeah, the out in May is 6 Ostriches. It's the second of my Dr. Bannerman vet mysteries. So a series of mysteries, because I think a veterinarian makes a great detective, because we're solving mysteries all the time with kind of detective uncooperative witnesses. We have uncooperative patients. Our patients don't talk, so we're always having to look for clues, right? So anyway, it's set in a fictional town in rural Manitoba, so it brings in a little bit of Manitoba flavor. So 6 Ostriches is the second one of that series. First one was 54 Pigs, it came out last year, and then 11 Huskies will be out in the spring of 2024. And so that's done, written, it's just worming its way through the editorial process. And then I'm about halfway done writing, as yet untitled, but the working title is Call the Cow Leech, and it is to be a popular history of veterinary medicine. So an accessible history for the general public.
That's the one that you had mentioned earlier. Sounds fascinating. So thank you so much for this incredible conversation about pets and life and humans and pets.
Oh, yeah, no, thank you. My pleasure, absolutely.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for being here. Remember, you can buy Philipp's book from Bank Square Books if you want a signed book, and obviously you can get them from the library. So I hope to see you all again soon at some point. But Philipp, have a wonderful night and happy
Thanks very much.
veterinarian.
Thank you. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.